The room was silent, but not with peace. It was the silence of power holding its breath. 12 men in tailored suits sat along a glassy mahogany table inside the Empire Grand's executive boardroom. Sunlight filtered in through tall windows, gleaming off nameplates etched in gold. At the head sat Sheikh Hassan al-Hadi, a man whose silence weighed heavier than most speeches. He leaned forward, his voice low and deliberate as he spoke in Arabic. "Compliance flexibility shall remain conditional on mutual regulatory discretion," he said smoothly. But the phrasing was sly, subtle, and not a soul in the room caught it. The Americans, senior partners from Landstone Holdings, nodded politely, pretending to understand. Their translator hesitated, unsure. The legal team kept quiet. A moment passed. Another. Then, unexpectedly, a voice rose from the side of the room. Not from legal. Not from the translation booth. Not from anyone seated at the table. From a man in janitor's blues, holding a mop. He spoke in fluent Arabic, calm, clear, unshaken. "What you just said, Your Excellency, is not a clarification. It's a trap." The room cracked open. A glass clicked. Someone dropped a pen. Every head turned at once. There he was, standing near the sidewall, beside the trash cart. But, so quiet. And suddenly the most powerful presence in the room. Sheikh Hassan's eyes narrowed. The janitor took a step forward, unhurried. "That clause, as you stated, removes bilateral oversight. It gives your firm post-signature override authority, which, respectfully, violates U.S. compliance law under Clause 412. Now even the Sheikh's translator looked stunned. Robert Malloy, Landstone's lead negotiator, leaned forward. "What the hell is this?" "Who are you?" someone snapped from legal. The man answered without flinching. "Elijah Cole, night janitor." He paused, then added, "Also former linguist with the U.S. Army. 12 years in the field. Riyadh, Amman, Damascus. Fluent in Arabic, Levantine, and Gulf dialects. I hold a degree in comparative law from Howard University." A beat of silence. Malloy blinked. "Why the hell are you cleaning floors?" Elijah didn't answer. He didn't need to. The Sheikh tilted his head, eyes fixed. "Heard me. Understood me. When none of them did. I did. And you interrupted me?" "I clarified," Elijah said softly, "for the people pretending they understood." The translator swallowed hard. Sweat beaded on his brow. The Sheikh looked at him sideways. "Is what he said true?" The translator hesitated. "Tell me now," the Sheikh said, voice suddenly cold. "Yes," the translator whispered. "It could be read that way. Leave." The man gathered his things and fled the room. A briefcase swung awkwardly behind him. Elijah stood still, both hands resting on his mop handle. "Sir," Malloy snapped, "you have no authority here." "Neither does an illegal clause," Elijah replied. The Sheikh chuckled softly. "Mr. Cole, what would you do if this clause were in your contract?" Elijah looked him in the eye. "I'd rewrite it. Or walk." The Sheikh's lips twitched into something like a smile. "Interesting." He rose from his chair. "This meeting is adjourned," he said in English. "We will reconvene tomorrow, after your team has reviewed this contract more carefully, with someone capable of reading between the lines." Malloy's face was pale. "This is irregular." "Your entire legal team missed a critical clause," the Sheikh said. "And this man did not." His voice was still soft, but it cut deeper than steel. "I will not sign until your firm proves it deserves this partnership." With that he turned and walked out. Executives stared after him in stunned silence. The room remained frozen for a long moment before Malloy exploded. "Who let him in the damn room?" "He's staff," someone muttered. "Night shift. We don't even do background on janitors." Malloy turned to Elijah. "You better hope your little outburst didn't tank a billion-dollar deal." Elijah didn't flinch. "I didn't tank it. I just stopped it from becoming a legal disaster, for both sides." Malloy's jaw worked furiously, but before he could speak again, a soft voice cut through the tension. "Let him go." Everyone turned. It was Veronica Ellison, general manager of the Empire Grand, standing in the doorway with a neutral expression and sharp eyes. She stepped into the room. "Elijah is under hotel authority, not yours," she said coolly. "And in this case, he just saved your firm from international arbitration." She turned to Elijah. "Take the service elevator. I'll see you in my office in an hour." Elijah nodded once, calm as ever. He pushed his cart down the hall, mop steady, steps quiet. But the silence behind him was no longer filled with dismissal. It was filled with unease, with questions, with grudging respect, with fear that someone they never saw had just seen everything. The service elevator rattled on the way down. Elijah stood still, mop propped beside him, eyes unfocused. The fluorescent light above flickered, casting dull shadows across the metal walls. His pulse had settled, but not the silence inside him. He had just interrupted one of the most powerful men in the financial world. And now he was expected in the general manager's office. At the staff floor, the doors slid open with a chime. Elijah stepped out into the muted corridors of the hotel's underbelly. Hallways lined with rolling carts, locked doors, employee bulletin boards, and the faint scent of industrial cleaner. He walked to the locker room, changed out of his uniform in practiced silence, then splashed cold water on his face. His reflection in the mirror stared back, steady, unreadable. A face people ignored. A voice they never asked for. Until today. At precisely 9:58 a.m., Elijah stood outside Veronica Ellison's office. He wore a pressed button-up, sleeves rolled. Professional. Not flashy. Still invisible, by design. The assistant gave a short nod. "Go in." He stepped inside. Veronica's office was all order and steel. Glass desk, wall of awards, tall windows overlooking the river. She didn't look up right away. Her fingers tapped against a folder on the desk. Then she spoke. Measured. "Sit." Elijah obeyed. She opened the folder. "Your file says janitorial staff, night shift. Hired 18 months ago through an external contractor." "Yes, ma'am." "No disciplinary actions. Never late. No complaints. You sweep, you disappear, you get paid. Is that accurate?" "Yes." She closed the folder. "Then tell me, Mr. Cole, how the hell did you just upend $1 billion negotiation?" He held her gaze. "Because no one else would." Silence again. Veronica leaned forward. "What you said up there was precise. Not guesswork. That wasn't luck. I don't gamble with legal language." Her eyebrow arched. "I read," he continued. "I listen. I know how power hides behind words." "And you speak Arabic?" she said, voice cooler now. "Gulf dialect?" "Multiple dialects. Fluent." "And law?" "I have a degree. Comparative law. Howard University. Focused on linguistic implications in contract arbitration. Graduated top 10%. Veronica leaned back. "So why the hell are you pushing a mop?" He hesitated. "After the army, I took some time off to take care of my mother. When I tried to re-enter the workforce, no one wanted a linguist with a 5-year resume gap, PTSD history, and a black face with an Arabic surname." Veronica blinked. "Arabic surname?" "Elijah bin Malik Cole. Shortened on applications." That answer hung in the air like truth too heavy to argue with. She exhaled. "So what do you want, Elijah?" He shook his head. "I didn't come here to ask for anything. I just heard something dangerous. I spoke up." "Do you know how much trouble you've caused?" "Yes." "Do you regret it?" "No." Veronica studied him for a long moment. Then she opened a drawer and pulled out a slim white envelope. "I've already received 3 calls. Legal. They're in chaos. I figured. They want to blacklist you from this property. Ban you. Bury you. Then why am I here? Because I don't take orders from men who sign deals they don't read." She slid the envelope across the desk. "Elijah, your off-floor duties effective immediately. I want you in conference room 17B this afternoon. Bring every note, memory, scrap you have on what you heard. We're reopening the compliance review." He stared at her. "You're serious? I run this building. I protect its reputation. And today you did too. He picked up the envelope. There's something else, she said, tapping her desk. I looked into the original contract draft. The clause you flagged? It wasn't supposed to be there. It was added, quietly, last week. By whom? Legal won't say. But someone knew it was in Arabic and knew most people wouldn't catch it. Elijah's jaw tensed. Weaponized language. Exactly. The pause. Then Veronica added, you said something back there that stuck with me. I just knew someone had to say it. He nodded. You ever think about saying more? His fingers tightened around the envelope. Only when I think someone will listen. Veronica smiled faintly. Today they did. At 1 p.m., Elijah stepped into conference room 17B. It was smaller, windowless, and far less intimidating than the boardroom upstairs, but this time he wasn't here to clean. A young compliance officer named Leah Grant was already inside, surrounded by printouts and a half-finished coffee. She looked up. You're the janitor who ruined everyone's lunch. I prefer guy who stopped a legal bomb, Elijah replied. She smirked. Fair. They got to work. Clause by clause. Language by language. Elijah pointed out translation traps, passive structures, implied overrides, authority shift language masked as operational flexibility. Leah took notes, fast, furious, sometimes wide-eyed. By late afternoon, they had built a file. At the top of the printout was a title. Clause 17, Intent versus Manipulation. As Elijah packed up, Leah looked at him. Where did you learn to read contracts like that? He smiled faintly. On nights like this. Alone. Quiet. Watching how people sign away their power, because no one tells them they're holding it. She said nothing. Then, quietly, we could use more people like you. He looked at the folder. No, he said. You need fewer people who pretend I don't exist. The next morning, a meeting was called, but Elijah wasn't invited. Up on the 33rd floor, in a glass-walled office lined with compliance awards and discreet cameras, Daniel Mercer, senior risk counsel at Landstone Holdings, closed the file folder on his desk. Across from him sat Philip Warren, the man whose name rarely appeared on documents but whose shadow hovered over half the firm's most opaque deals. Philip tapped the cover of the folder twice. Where did this guy come from? Daniel adjusted his glasses. Elijah Cole. Employed by Third Path Services, contracted for night cleaning. No red flags in the file. No complaints. No incidents. Philip raised an eyebrow. And yet, he dismantled a Sheikh's clause in front of a dozen executives. Daniel hesitated, then added, his resume doesn't tell the full story. He reached into his drawer and pulled out a printout. Military service record, university transcripts, letters of commendation from a war zone linguistics unit. Army translator. 12 years. Honorably discharged. Studied comparative law after deployment. Graduated top 10%. Interned briefly at an arbitration consultancy in D.C. Philip stared at it. Then why the hell is he mopping floors? Daniel shrugged. Gap years. PTSD note on his VA file. Some unpaid leave to care for an ailing parent. After that, he seems to disappear from consideration. Or someone made sure he did. Daniel blinked. You think he was filtered out? Philip stood, walked to the window. The skyline of Manhattan shimmered beyond the glass. I think he was filtered down. People like him, too smart, too trained, too sharp, they make others nervous. Especially when they speak languages the bosses don't. Daniel didn't respond. Philip continued. And now he's back in the room. Which means our margins for error just shrank. He turned eyes hard. Find out who flagged that clause in the final draft. Quietly. Daniel nodded. You want me to handle Cole? No, Philip said, tapping the folder again. Let the system do what it always does. He'll get tired. He'll get ignored. Or he'll push too hard, and someone will make it look like he went too far. He smirked. They always do. Downstairs, Elijah sat alone at a break room table, sipping lukewarm coffee from a paper cup. His folder, notes, clause analyses, annotated contracts, lay beside him. The door opened. Veronica Ellison stepped in, heels clicking softly against the tile. "You didn't go home last night," she said. "I tried," Elijah replied. "Didn't feel like sleep was coming." She nodded, then slid a file onto the table. "I pulled your full employment background. Not the one they gave us. The real one." He opened it slowly. His own history stared back. Military ID, language proficiencies, security clearance stamps, even the letter from his professor at Howard that had once landed him a spot at a prestigious arbitration firm before the offer was quietly rescinded. Veronica sat down across from him. "Someone buried this." "I figured." "Why?" "Because I check too many boxes people don't want checked," Elijah said. "What?" "Ex-military. Speaks Arabic. Knows contract law. Doesn't play dumb." Veronica tilted her head. "But you took a janitor job anyway." He shrugged. "People talk when they think you're no one. And in silence, you learn who holds the strings." She looked at him for a long moment. "You planning to stay invisible?" "Not anymore." Veronica's lips curved. "But because the legal team is stalling. They're calling the clause a linguistic misunderstanding. That's rich. They want to repackage it as an internal oversight. No fault, no blame, just a clean revision." Elijah sipped his coffee. "Let me guess. No accountability, no paper trail." "Exactly." He reached into his folder, pulled out a printout. "This is a side clause I found in the second draft. It wasn't there before. Buried in a footnote labeled administrative adjustment." She scanned it, eyes narrowing. "The clause allows for unilateral contract expansion in future ventures." "Exactly," Elijah said. "Today was just a test run. Tomorrow they'd scale it globally." Veronica leaned back. "You're not just cleaning up messes anymore." Elijah gave a faint smile. "Maybe I never was." At 4 p.m., Elijah received a text from Leah Grant in compliance. Clause flagged again. This time buried in a vendor framework from 6 months ago. "I think this is systematic." He replied, "Forward it to me. And check if the signature route includes Warren or Mercer." Minutes later she responded, "Both. Indirectly. But their fingerprints are there." Elijah stared at the screen. Something larger was at play. A pattern. A method. Not just sloppy oversight, but deliberate repetition. He opened his folder again. Redrew the flow. Not just of the contracts, but of the people. Who approved the language. Who translated. Who reviewed. Who remained silent. Names formed a network. A quiet architecture of complicity. That evening, back in his small apartment in Queens, Elijah sat at his kitchen table under a flickering light. His father's old brass compass, worn, scratched, reliable, rested beside his notes. He turned it slowly. Not just direction, but purpose. The weight of words could crush. Or they could lift. And tomorrow, he would make sure no one in power misunderstood which way the compass pointed. The return to the 33rd floor was unannounced. Elijah pushed his cleaning cart as he always did. Silent, efficient, invisible. But this time, the mop wasn't the only thing he carried. Tucked under a stack of folded cloths was a slim leather-bound notebook. Inside it were names, dates, clause references, and initials from over half a dozen prior deals involving Landstone Holdings and various foreign investors. He had spent the past week combing through public filings, internal press releases, and anonymized procurement databases from his Army contacts. The same clause, sometimes reworded, sometimes hidden deeper, kept reappearing. And always it led back to two names. Philip Warren, Daniel Mercer. As he moved past the glass conference room, he saw them, standing by the window, sipping coffee, heads close together. He paused just long enough to catch a fragment. "He's asking the wrong questions," Daniel murmured. Philip didn't answer, but his smile was tight, brittle. Elijah moved on. He entered the side hall, where unused file cabinets lined the wall. His master key, intended for janitorial emergencies, slid easily into the lock of room 12C, an old document storage area no longer listed on the employee access maps. Inside, dust floated in sunbeams. He closed the door behind him and flipped the light switch. The files were labeled by quarter, by region, by transaction code. But he wasn't here to search blindly. He already had a target. Contract 7B. Signed Q3, 2 years ago. Regional office, Dubai. The deal had been celebrated in the press. A landmark partnership in cross-border sustainable financing. What hadn't been mentioned was the clause giving unilateral project control to the foreign entity after year 1. He found it in drawer 4D, misfiled under environmental consultation. His hands moved quickly, pages skimming under his fingers. And there it was. Buried on page 84, under Article 14, Maintenance Allowance, a single paragraph written in Arabic. He read it once. Then again. A copy and paste of the same override clause Sheikh Hassan had tried to use. His pulse didn't spike. But something inside him turned sharp. He took photos, slipped the file back in place, and exited the room as if nothing had happened. That night, Elijah met Leah Grant in the staff parking lot behind the hotel. She looked tired, her ID badge clipped to her hoodie, eyes darting around like someone who'd been looking over her shoulder too long. "You said this was urgent?" she said. Elijah handed her the photos. "They've done it before. At least 6 times. Different phrasing, same intent." She scanned the printouts. "This is damning." "And it's deliberate," Elijah said. "It's not bad translation. It's a pattern. A weapon." Leah swallowed. "You know what they'll do if this goes public." "I'm not taking it public. Yet." She looked at him. "So what are you doing?" He pointed toward the top floors. "I'm cleaning." The next morning, Elijah entered the building early, too early for the lawyers, too early for the board. He took the elevator to floor 20, where the internal copy center operated. Most employees thought it was just for printing promotional packets. But Elijah knew the floor handled all board briefing books, including legal summaries prepared before any major investor negotiation. He knocked. A stocky man with thick glasses opened the door. "Can I help you?" "I'm here to pick up a set for room 17B. Veronica Allison's office." The man hesitated, then nodded. "Wait here." He disappeared behind a wall of high-speed printers. Elijah waited calmly, counting the seconds. When the man returned with the folder, Elijah didn't open it until he was alone, inside the elevator. He flipped through the pages. On page 17, a clean English version of the Sheikh's contract proposal. No mention of any problematic clause. Then in the back, a dual-language appendix. And there it was again. The override clause. In Arabic only. No English translation. No annotation. No compliance footnote. Elijah exhaled slowly. They were still trying. That afternoon, Veronica summoned him. Her tone was cool, her face unreadable. "You've been poking around places your badge doesn't authorize," she said. "I used my janitorial key," Elijah replied. "Everything stayed clean." "This isn't a joke." "No. It's a liability." She held up the Sheikh's contract. "You think you're the only one who noticed this?" "No," he said. "But I'm the only one who said it out loud." She studied him. "You're playing a dangerous game, Elijah." He leaned forward. "So are they." Veronica didn't respond for a long time. Then she said, "You found something else." He handed her the folder from the copy center. She read silently. Her jaw clenched halfway through. This version was never approved by compliance. "Exactly." She looked up. "You realize what this means?" "I do." She stood. "Elijah, if this comes out, we're not talking about a botched deal. We're talking about systemic contract fraud on an international scale." "I know. You'll be targeted." He smiled faintly. "I already am." That night, Elijah returned to his apartment and sat at the window. Below him, the city glowed, restless, endless. He opened his notebook, turned to a fresh page, and wrote at the top, "Who profits from silence?" Then he began to list names. Not just the powerful, but the complicit, the ones who translated, the ones who approved, the ones who shrugged. And for the first time, he added his own. Not as a victim, but as the voice rising from the margins. A whisper that had become a warning. And soon, a reckoning. They gave him 15 minutes. 15 minutes in a glass room filled with people who made more in a quarter than he had in a decade. Executives, legal directors, corporate advisors, all seated around a brushed steel table in conference room 6A. The kind of room where janitors weren't supposed to speak, let alone lead. At the head sat Philip Warren, calm, smiling, unreadable. To his right was Daniel Mercer, tapping a pen with mock patience. And at the very end of the table, barely acknowledged, sat Veronica Ellison, silent and watchful. Elijah stood at the center, a man with no title and nothing to lose. He clicked the remote. The screen behind him lit up with a slide titled, Clause 17, Linguistic Manipulation in Contractual Sovereignty. A few eyebrows rose. He began. I'm not here to accuse anyone, Elijah said. I'm here to reveal what's already in the documents, quietly, consistently, and dangerously embedded across multiple deals. He tapped the slide. This clause, originally discovered in the proposed deal with Sheikh Hassan, grants unilateral amendment power to the foreign partner after signature. It bypasses bilateral compliance entirely, and in its original form, it only appears in Arabic. Daniel scoffed. We've heard this already. Have you read it? Elijah asked. Daniel's jaw tightened. Elijah turned to the next slide, scanned images of 6 contracts from past years, each with a red box highlighting the Arabic clause. Some were full translations. Others were partial. One was a photograph from a printed appendix, intentionally unscanned in internal summaries. He let the silence sit. I cross-referenced every instance. Different regions. Different projects. Same structure. Same legal effect. Philip leaned back. If you're implying internal malpractice, Mr. Cole, you'd better have more than slides. I'm implying intent, Elijah replied. Pattern implies process. And in law, process reveals motive. He turned to the next page, a diagram linking initials from approval chains. We've traced recurring sign-offs on the Arabic inserts, same 2 people every time. Sometimes indirect. Sometimes through backdoor vendors. He paused. All trails lead back to Legal Review Tier 3, under Daniel Mercer. A quiet thud, like a shoe dropping. Daniel's pen stopped moving. Veronica sat up straighter. Philip didn't blink. Daniel finally spoke. This is baseless. No, Elijah said, it's pattern-based. Verified with timestamp metadata and clause drift. The kind of detail only someone fluent in the source language could see. Another click. The screen flashed with time logs, upload records, edit traces, approval routing, highlighted dates, matching initials. You're suggesting, Philip said slowly, that our own counsel inserted a clause that undermines domestic legal parity. I'm not suggesting it, Elijah said. I'm showing it. Veronica stood. We've verified the audit trail. It holds up. Philip folded his hands. Assuming this is all true, what do you expect us to do? Launch an internal witch hunt based on a janitor's slideshow? Elijah stepped forward. I expect accountability. He turned off the projector. But if that's too much, I'll settle for sunlight. Because if this room doesn't deal with it, the press will. Or a regulatory board. Or a sheik with more lawyers than friends. He looked at them, one by one. You can fire me. Discredit me. Make it about who I am. But the clause doesn't care who wrote it. It only cares who allowed it. The pause. Then Elijah turned to leave. No applause. No, thank you. Only the sound of truth lingering like smoke after a match. That night, Elijah's phone buzzed. A text from Leah Grant. Legal froze access to the internal server. I'm locked out of the audit trail. Someone's deleting logs. Another message came seconds later. You have a target on your back now. Just thought you should know. He stared at the screen. The cost of speaking up had arrived. At 2:13 a.m., a black SUV pulled up across the street from Elijah's apartment. It stayed there for 41 minutes. Engine off. Lights out. No movement inside. At 2:55 a.m., it drove away. Elijah never saw it, but someone took a photo of it from a nearby building and texted it to him without a name. They don't like janitors with sharp tongues. The next morning, Veronica met Elijah in the hotel basement. She looked tired, makeup lighter, voice thinner than usual. "You made waves," she said. "I made noise," Elijah replied. "There's a difference." "I know." She handed him an envelope. "You're officially on unpaid leave. They're calling it a compliance freeze." "Figured that was coming." "But I've seen this before," she added. "They freeze, then bury, then blacklist." Elijah looked her in the eye. "I'm not staying buried." "Then don't be stupid," she said quietly. "Pick your next move carefully." He nodded. "I already have." That afternoon, a sealed envelope arrived at the office of a regulatory attorney at the U.S. Department of International Commerce. Inside, 6 flagged contracts, a USB drive, metadata logs, clause comparisons, and 1 note. If this disappears inside your system, there are 5 more copies headed elsewhere. Elijah Cole. The sun hadn't risen yet when Elijah stepped into the old library on 134th and Lenox. The building was quiet. Faded murals lined the walls. The air smelled of dust and forgotten pages. In the back corner, behind a false shelf and under a disconnected camera, he found what he needed: a private room, no surveillance, weak Wi-Fi, no ties to Landstone Holdings. He opened his laptop, powered on the encrypted drive, and waited. The system blinked twice before the terminal came online. Leah Grant's face appeared via a secure link. "I'm in," she said, rubbing her eyes. "I had to spoof a timestamp to bypass the archive lock, but I got the deleted logs." Elijah leaned forward. "And?" "It's worse than we thought." She uploaded a batch of files. Not just 6 contracts. 15. All with similar Arabic-only clauses. All signed off by 2 people in legal and 1 external consultant, H. Calvert. Elijah frowned. That name hasn't shown up before. Because it's a ghost vendor. LLC registered to a mail drop in Delaware. No real office. No employee list. He rubbed his jaw. "That's the middleman." "Exactly," she said. "They use him to insert clauses without triggering internal oversight." Leah hesitated. "There's more." She dropped another file into the shared drive. Elijah opened it. A scanned internal memo from 3 months ago. Subject: Off-ramp scenarios. Coal interference risk. Status: Flecked, monitor and contain. Suggested actions: lateral freeze, PR shielding, access suppression. His heart slowed. "They knew about me," he said. Leah nodded. "Before the Sheikh deal. They were already watching you." Elijah sat back in the chair. The truth felt cold in his chest, but clarifying, like water cutting through smoke. "I'm not just a janitor anymore," he whispered. "No," Leah said. "You're the fuse." Across the city, in a sleek glass tower overlooking the Hudson, Philip Warren was on the phone. "She's still helping him," he said, pacing. "The compliance girl, Leah Grant. She accessed the vault. We need to contain this." On the other end, someone replied in clipped tones. Philip's face tightened. "If it leaks, we're not talking about reputational damage. We're talking about jail time." He turned to face the window. "Make it stop." That afternoon, Elijah walked into a modest cafe near the courthouse district. At a corner table sat a woman in her 40s with silver-rimmed glasses and a laptop open. Her name was Alicia Duval, a journalist known for 3 things: precise language, relentless follow-through, and never publishing a story until it had teeth made of steel. "You brought a USB," she said. He slid it across the table. "Before you open that," Elijah said, "understand something. If this story goes live, it's not just about bad contracts. It's about a system built to hide things in languages no one's allowed to speak." Alicia looked at him for a long moment. Then she inserted the drive. Her face changed as she read. Her fingers stopped mid-keystroke. She looked up. "This isn't a leak," she said. "It's a fire." Elijah nodded. "And you're lighting it." That night, in his apartment, Elijah opened his notebook again. At the top of a new page, he wrote, "Compass Doctrine, you don't chase power. You follow truth and let it burn through the dark." He drew a diagram. Timelines. institutions. He wrote not like someone preparing a case, but like someone preparing a reckoning. Then he turned the page and began drafting something he hadn't written in years. A public statement. 3 days later, it went live. Alicia Duval's piece appeared in the Post-Ledger under the title, "The Language of Control: How a billion-dollar firm used Arabic clauses to rewrite international deals." The exposé spread like wildfire. Within 6 hours, it trended across legal blogs, whistleblower forums, and financial news feeds. By noon, CNN and BBC had picked it up. A photo of Elijah, standing quietly in the hotel basement, mop in hand, eyes defiant, became the image of the story. The caption read, "Elijah Cole, the janitor who read the fine print." Calls came in. From journalists. From attorneys. From former translators. From investors who suddenly wanted to recheck their contracts. And then, from people like him. Men and women from working-class jobs. Security guards. Mailroom clerks. Call center agents. All writing variations of the same message. They thought I wouldn't notice either. In a conference room high above the city, Philip Warren slammed a folder against the table. He turned the janitor into the story. He made himself the symbol. Daniel Mercer was pale. "He's going to testify. We can stop that." "How?" Philip picked up his phone. "There are other ways to clean up messes." That night, someone tried to break into Elijah's apartment. They failed, but they left the door cracked. A warning. Not subtle. Elijah found it just before sunrise. He stood in the hallway, the brass compass in his hand. The arrow still pointed north. He didn't flinch. He didn't call the cops. He just closed the door, locked it, and went back inside. Because tomorrow, he had a subpoena hearing. And this time, he wouldn't be speaking from the margins. The room was colder than he expected. Panel walls, recessed lighting, rows of nameplates lined before a semicircular dais. Cameras were mounted discreetly in corners. Not for broadcast, but for the record. Federal Trade Commission, Subcommittee on International Ethics and Language Transparency. 9 a.m. sharp. Elijah Cole walked into the room not as a janitor, not as a former soldier, but as a man bearing truths no one had wanted spoken aloud. He wore a gray suit, not new but pressed. A plain black tie. No watch. No phone. Just a brass compass in his coat pocket, warm from his fingers. At the center table, he sat alone. Across from him sat a panel of 6, attorneys, senators, and trade officials. Their expressions ranged from curiosity to veiled skepticism. A voice rang out. "Mr. Elijah Cole, thank you for appearing today. You understand you are under oath?" "I do." "You may begin." He started not with accusations, but with clarity. "I'm here because words have weight," Elijah said, voice steady. "And when used carelessly, or strategically, they become weapons. Especially in languages not everyone is allowed to speak." He pulled out a folder and slid it to the table's document camera. "This is Clause 17, as it appeared in 6 separate contracts involving foreign investment partnerships with Landstone Holdings. It allows for unilateral amendments to joint agreements. But it was only written in Arabic, and only in certain internal versions." The screen behind him displayed the clause. Arabic script filled half the frame. Then Elijah clicked, and the English translation appeared beside it. Guess. Not from the panel but from a few legal observers in the gallery. He continued. This clause was never disclosed in English in final summaries. Its legal implications shift controlling interest without mutual consent. It bypasses standard U.S. compliance review. And it appeared in 15 contracts across 7 countries. He tapped again. Another slide. Here are the names of the people who signed off. Repeatedly. Silently. One of the panel members, Senator Aldridge, frowned. "Are you saying this was a systemic effort to conceal legal meaning through selective translation?" "I'm saying it was intentional," Elijah replied. "And I can prove it." He opened the next file. Time logs. Metadata. Internal emails Leah had extracted. One in particular stood out. "Leave the Arabic section intact. Legal won't catch it if we don't translate." A moment of silence. Then a second voice asked, "Mr. Cole, what is your background?" He met their eyes. Army linguist. Arabic translator. Law graduate from Howard. Former intern in arbitration. Current janitor. That last word landed hard. One of the panelists leaned forward. "Why would someone like you take a janitorial job?" He smiled faintly. "Because no one sees you coming when they think you don't matter." Outside the chamber, Veronica Ellison watched from a side bench. She was not officially part of the hearing, but she had helped assemble the data. Her eyes never left Elijah's face. Next to her, Leah Grant sat with a closed laptop and fingers nervously tapping the folder in her lap. "He's doing it," Leah whispered. "He's really doing it." Meanwhile, inside a private boardroom at Landstone Holdings, Philip Warren stood before a monitor watching the live stream. His jaw locked. His voice tight. "Get Mercer on the phone." "He's not picking up," his assistant said. "Then get someone else. Now." Behind him, the firm's general counsel spoke quietly to another executive. "If the feds investigate this, we're looking at sanctions. Possibly indictments." Philip didn't turn. "Then bury it." "Sir." "I said bury it." Back at the hearing, Elijah reached the final slide. A simple quote appeared behind him. "Silence is not ignorance. Sometimes, it's preparation." He looked up. "I was never trying to bring down a company," he said. "I was trying to stop a system from exploiting silence as a shield. You don't need law degrees to understand right and wrong. You just need to pay attention when no one thinks you're listening." He closed his folder. The room stayed quiet for a beat. Then Senator Aldridge spoke. "Mr. Cole, we thank you for your testimony." He nodded. "I'm not finished." Murmurs rose. Aldridge raised an eyebrow. "Excuse me?" Elijah reached into his pocket and placed something on the table. A small recorder. "I brought this," he said, "because I figured some people wouldn't believe me." He pressed play. A voice played through the chamber, calm, precise, unmistakably Philip Warren. "If it leaks, we're not talking about reputational damage. We're talking about jail time." Another voice, Daniel Mercer. "He's going to testify." Philip again. "There are other ways to clean up messes." The room went still. Then all hell broke loose. Within an hour, subpoenas were issued. By nightfall, 3 corporate offices were under federal review. Daniel Mercer went silent. Philip Warren issued a formal statement denying all knowledge. But by then, it was too late. That night, Elijah returned home. He walked up the stairs slowly, fingers trailing the old railing. At his door he paused. No threats this time. No broken lock. Just a quiet envelope waiting. He opened it. Inside was a card. On the front, a compass. Inside, one line handwritten. "Thank you for showing us where North really is." No signature. But he didn't need one. They called it Contract Gate. 3 days after Elijah's testimony, headlines dominated every major news outlet. Whistleblower janitor exposes $2 billion in fraudulent clauses. The language trap, how multinational deals exploited translation loopholes. From mop to mic, Elijah Cole's rise shakes legal community. Inside Landstone Holdings, the atmosphere changed overnight. Glass doors that once glowed with confidence now reflected fear. Executives walked quickly, avoiding eye contact. The legal floor, once untouchable, was now half empty. And in Philip Warren's office, silence had become a constant presence. He sat at his desk, watching the news in a loop. No lawyers called back. His assistant had quit that morning. And Daniel Mercer? Nowhere to be found. Across the city, Elijah stood quietly outside the courthouse, his coat pulled tight against the wind. He hadn't spoken to the press. Hadn't given interviews. But still they followed. "Mr. Cole, do you believe the executives will face jail time? Was Veronica Ellison involved in the cover-up? Do you consider yourself a hero?" He said nothing. Because the truth didn't need more words, it needed action. And action had already begun. That afternoon, a federal audit team raided Landstone's digital records. They seized backups, servers, foreign transaction files. And most damning of all, a memo labeled Clause Positioning Strategy, Tier 3 Markets. Inside the memo, names of clients, instructions for localized insertions, suggested blind spots in internal reviews, and at the bottom, initials, PW and DM. Philip's world cracked open. At the same time, in a quiet coffee shop in Brooklyn, Leah Grant met with Alicia Duval. This was never just about Arabic, Leah said, sipping tea. That was the method. But the motive? Power. Exploitation. They knew these clauses could never pass in English. Alicia nodded, taking notes. What do you think happens next? Leah didn't blink. They'll fall. One by one. And someone will try to clean it up quietly. But it's too late. The janitor already swept. Meanwhile, in a private hotel suite under a different name, Daniel Mercer packed in silence. He had dyed his hair, shaved his beard, bought a one-way ticket to Lisbon. But just as he reached for his passport, his phone buzzed. A known number. He answered. A voice, distorted, said one thing. Run all you want. The compass is still pointing at you. Daniel dropped the phone and left the passport on the floor. Back in the city, Elijah stood before a closed classroom door. Not a courthouse. Not a corporate boardroom. Just a community center in Harlem. Inside, 20 young adults waited. Some with notebooks. Some with worn hoodies. One with a backpack full of cleaning supplies. He stepped in. On the board, Whistleblower Workshop, How to See What They Hide. He began simply. Truth isn't always in plain sight. Sometimes, it's hidden in translation. In footnotes. In silence. I'm not here to teach you law. I'm here to teach you how to pay attention. They listened, not because of his name, but because he sounded like someone who'd been ignored. And survived. At Landstone's corporate headquarters, new headlines rolled across the lobby monitors. SEC investigates board involvement in multi-year clause fraud. 3 top executives resign amid contract scandal. Philip Warren placed on administrative leave pending charges. The sky above the building was overcast. As if the city itself had dimmed the light, waiting to see what rose next from the ruin. That night, Elijah returned home to find a package at his door. Inside, a folded newspaper, a fountain pen, a note handwritten in sharp, steady cursive. They built this house on silence. You lit the match. Let it burn. He smiled. Then wrote one sentence on the last page of his notebook. Collapse isn't chaos. It's preparation for rebuilding. And under it he drew a single arrow, still pointing north. The courtroom smelled of varnished wood and frayed history. Heavy doors shut behind Elijah as he entered. The federal courthouse on Center Street wasn't new, but the eyes inside it were sharp. Reporters, regulators, victims, observers. And somewhere beyond the cameras, in the quiet rows at the back, Leah sat with her hands folded tight. The case was no longer theoretical. It had a title now. United States versus Warren, Mercer, et al. And Elijah Cole, janitor turned whistleblower, was star witness number 1. He stepped into the box, right hand raised, sworn in under oath. But this time, there were no sliding glass doors. No brushed steel tables. No pretend smiles. This was real. And irreversible. The prosecutor, Monica Reeves, stepped forward. Mr. Cole, for the record, please state your occupation at the time you discovered the documents in question. Night janitor at Landstone Holdings, Elijah said. And are you trained in Arabic? Yes. Former Army linguist. Translator. What did you find in the documents? He took a breath. Clauses written exclusively in Arabic. Clauses that, when translated, shifted contractual control to foreign entities. These were not shown in the English summaries. They bypassed internal oversight. Monica held up a printed contract. Is this one of them? He nodded. Page 84. Bottom third. And were these contracts signed? Yes. And the clauses enforced? He hesitated, then answered, in at least 4 known cases, yes. They cost U.S. stakeholders majority control. Murmurs echoed through the courtroom. Next came the defense. Philip Warren's lawyer, An aging man with silver hair and a smile too polished stood slowly. Mr. Cole, I don't dispute your translation skills. But isn't it true that you accessed internal files without authorization? I used a janitor's key. I opened a file room. And you're not part of legal, correct? No. You have no law degree? I passed the bar in D.C., never licensed. So, in a way, you took it upon yourself to interpret law beyond your authority. Elijah leaned forward. No, sir. I didn't interpret the law. I read the words they hid. The defense shifted tactics. And what about your motives, Mr. Cole? Some say you were seeking revenge. That you resented your position. He paused. I wasn't resentful. I was invisible. There's a difference. And now you're famous. A hero. That's quite an upgrade. I didn't ask for fame, Elijah said quietly. I asked for accountability. Hours passed. Exhibits were presented. Email threads read aloud. Metadata displayed on courtroom screens. The most damning moment came when an internal voice memo played for the jury. Push the Arabic clause to the footnote. No one in compliance reads it anyway. Daniel Mercer. The judge didn't even blink. But Philip Warren finally did. Outside, the press swarmed. Elijah. Over here. Do you think Warren will go to prison? Did you work alone? Are you starting a foundation? He ignored them. Until one voice, quiet, unsure, cut through the noise. Mr. Cole? Turned. A young man, no older than 20, in a faded security guard uniform, held out a crumpled piece of paper. I read what you did, the boy said. They always told me not to ask questions. I think I'm ready to. Elijah took the paper. It was a drawing. Simple. A compass, sketched in pencil. Keep this, the boy said. You showed me where true north is. Elijah didn't speak. He just nodded. Later that night, at a small diner on the edge of Harlem, Elijah sat across from Leah and Veronica. The mood was heavy, not celebratory. They'll fight this for years, Veronica said. They'll use loopholes, appeals, settlements. I know, Elijah said. But the public knows now, Leah added. And that's a start. He stirred his coffee. The system won't collapse in one verdict. But maybe. He looked up. We just cracked the foundation. The next day, Philip Warren was arrested in his penthouse. No press release. No statement. Just a man in cuffs, walking down the steps with no one clapping. Daniel Mercer turned himself in the following morning. Landstone Holdings froze all foreign contract activity. Its board voted to dismantle the entire Tier 3 legal division. A congressional hearing was scheduled for the following month. And quietly, in corners of the world rarely seen, other whistleblowers began to speak. A translator in Dubai. A junior analyst in Nairobi. A paralegal in Berlin. Each carrying their own truth. Each tracing the path Elijah Cole had carved. That evening, Elijah stood on the rooftop of his apartment. The skyline was dark, punctured by neon and promise. The wind tugged at his coat. In his hand was the compass, still warm from his pocket. He turned it slowly. Let it settle. Still pointing north. He whispered to no one and everyone. The reckoning isn't the end. It's the beginning of remembering what we were always meant to stand for. It started with a voicemail. 5 months before the hearing, 5 months before he was anything more than the man who emptied trash bins in glass offices, Elijah had walked into the janitor's break room and found his phone vibrating. No caller ID. Just a red dot blinking. He pressed play. A woman's voice came through, rough with static but unmistakably real. Hey Cole. I know you're not exactly picking up these days. But I found something. A clause. In the Sheikh file. I translated it 3 times and it still doesn't make sense. Only in Arabic. Not in the English summary. You always said to trust the original language. Well, I did. And now I think I'm scared. No name. No follow-up. Just silence. But Elijah knew the voice. Sergeant Ayanna Briggs. They had served together overseas. She had a photographic memory and a temper like dry firewood. She was the only other linguist on his unit who could outpace him in dialect shifts. She was also the last person he spoke Arabic with after coming home, until she disappeared into the contractor world, working for legal vendors nobody questioned. He hadn't heard from her in over 2 years. That voicemail had haunted him. He tried calling back. Disconnected. He checked LinkedIn. Gone. He even searched databases, veterans' records, private forums. Nothing. Until one day, weeks later, a news bulletin appeared. Private translation vendor found dead in hotel room, ruled overdose. No foul play. No suspicion. Just another whisper swallowed whole. But Elijah knew Ayanna didn't drink. She didn't do pills. And she never ran from fire. So he started digging. And that's when he found Clause 17. It began as a way to honor her. To finish what she'd started. To make sense of why someone with a voice like hers would go silent. But soon, it became something else. Every contract he pulled. Every time a translation didn't line up. Every time a clause said non-transferable in English but revocable in Arabic. The pattern wasn't just personal. It was structural. Deliberate. Weaponized language, designed to elude scrutiny by hiding truth behind fluency most reviewers didn't have. Elijah remembered one night clearly. He'd stayed after hours, crouched behind a filing cabinet in the sub-basement of Landstone's archive floor, scanning an original contract from Riyadh. It had 2 signatures, 3 initials, and at the bottom, faint and fading, a translator's name in cursive Arabic. Briggs. She had translated it. She had tried to flag it. And somewhere along the way, she vanished. In the weeks that followed, Elijah stopped seeing himself as a janitor. He saw himself as a witness. Not of the company's crimes, but of the silences that allowed them. And when he discovered the voice memo between Philip and Daniel, he didn't feel angry. He felt ready. Back in the present, Elijah sat alone in his apartment, the compass in his palm. He scrolled through old files on a backup phone and replayed the voicemail one last time. I think I'm scared. He closed his eyes. Whispered into the stillness. I heard you, Ayanna. And I never stopped listening. The next morning, he walked to a nearby postal office and sent a small envelope. Inside, a single flash drive labeled AB. And a note. For her parents. She wasn't crazy. She was right. No return address. Just initials. EC. That night, he stood at the edge of Riverside Park, overlooking the dark waters of the Hudson. The city lights blinked like distant signals. Behind him, power was shifting. Buildings were crumbling. Courtrooms were being prepared. But inside him, the fire hadn't burned out. It had just become quieter. More focused. Sharpened by memory. He reached into his coat, pulled out the compass and whispered. She pointed me north. Now I keep walking. Philip Warren sat behind a polished defense table, dressed in a navy suit that fit like armor. But his hands betrayed him, trembling, clasped too tightly. On the projection screen behind the prosecution, clause excerpts, audio transcripts, and digital footprints that led back to him. The courtroom was packed. Attorneys, lawmakers, foreign observers, all gathered not just to witness a trial, but to watch a symbol fall. Prosecutor Monica Reeves stood slowly, holding up a single sheet of paper. This, she said, is Clause 17 from the Riyadh deal. Signed by Landstone Holdings. Authorized by its senior legal team. And inserted under Mr. Warren's direction. She turned to the jury. But this isn't just a clause. It's a wedge, designed to shift financial control from U.S. partners to foreign entities, using untranslated language. Not disclosed. Not consented. Not legal. She paused. It is not merely unethical. It is criminal. Warren's lawyer rose, calm but strained. Ladies and gentlemen, we must remember, this is business. International law is complex. Language barriers exist. My client is not a translator. He relied on internal systems. He gestured to Elijah. But what we have here is a former janitor claiming to understand multi-billion-dollar deals. Is that credible? Or convenient? The jury didn't blink, because they'd already seen the memos. They'd heard the voice recordings. And they had heard Elijah's quiet, steady voice say, You don't need credentials to recognize deceit. You just need to read what they hide. That afternoon, the verdict was delivered. Philip Warren was found guilty on 5 counts. Fraudulent misrepresentation, conspiracy to defraud international partners, obstruction of regulatory process, unauthorized legal manipulation through concealed language, retaliation against whistleblowers. Sentencing to follow. A single gasp broke the silence. Then the world moved again. Across the city, stock tickers trembled. Landstone Holdings' share price dropped 36% in a single hour. Their overseas partners froze transactions. 2 more executives resigned. And an emergency shareholder vote was scheduled. At a press conference that evening, Senator Aldridge stood beside Monica Reeves and Elijah Cole. "We are not here to celebrate," Aldridge said. "We are here to reset." He turned to Elijah. "And we are grateful to the man who reminded us that truth doesn't come from rank or title, but from courage." The crowd applauded. Elijah didn't smile. He simply nodded. Later that night, in the quiet of the courthouse atrium, Veronica Ellison found him standing by the window. "People keep saying this is your victory," she said. He didn't turn. "It's not victory," he replied. "It's accountability. There's a difference." She studied his profile. "You know what this means, don't you?" "What?" "You're no longer invisible." 3 days later, Elijah sat before a different panel, this time as an invited speaker at a closed-door summit on international contract reform. The room was full of suits, lanyards, interpreters, compliance officers. He began. "Language is power. Silence is weaponized every day in business. But fluency is not just about translation. It's about intention. And when we allow complexity to hide meaning, we're not being professional. We're being complicit." A murmur of agreement moved through the room. He closed his notes. "Write clearer laws. Train your teams better. And if someone says, 'That clause doesn't make sense,' listen to them, even if they're holding a mop." That evening, Elijah returned home to find a letter waiting. No return address. Inside, a court transcript. Underlined in red, a line from Philip Warren's sentencing hearing. "If I had known someone like him was watching, I would have never said what I did." And under it, a scribbled note. "They're always watching now. A friend." The next morning, Veronica handed Elijah a formal envelope. He opened it. Inside, a federal appointment. Special Advisor, Transparency and Ethics Division. He looked up. "This is real." Veronica nodded. "They want someone who's seen the system from both sides." He held the letter for a long moment. Then quietly asked, "And if I say no?" "Then you keep walking," she said. "But if you say yes, you start changing it." That night, Elijah sat alone in the park, watching the river move under the last light of dusk. He didn't feel triumphant. He felt heavy, like someone holding a lantern deep in a tunnel, not sure if he was closer to the end or just beginning. He pulled out the compass, watched it settle. Still north. Always north. And whispered, "The first stone has fallen. Let the walls come down." The office was smaller than expected. 2 windows. 1 desk. A bookshelf with more policy binders than people had fingers. But to Elijah, it felt cathedral-sized. He unlocked the door with a key labeled Ethics 4A. Pushed it open. And stepped into a room not built for show, but for work. The new title on the door read, Elijah Cole, Special Advisor, Office of Transparency and Language Compliance, Federal Trade Commission. He placed his compass on the desk, not for luck, but as a reminder. The first week, no one stopped by. The second week, a young woman from procurement asked if he could glance over a Vietnamese clause. The third, a compliance officer from Chicago emailed asking about a Nigerian contract with odd omissions. By the fourth week, the inbox was full. And so was the hallway. Elijah never raised his voice in meetings. Never made PowerPoint slides. He just read the footnotes. He asked, "Why is this part only in Korean?" He asked, "Who signed off on this Arabic version?" He asked, "What are you trying not to say?" And slowly, incredibly, people listened. Not because he was loud, but because he had become the man you called when the truth was tangled. Meanwhile, Landstone Holdings was dismantling its Tier 3 division. A new legal code was being written, with mandatory dual-language audits and whistleblower protections embedded in every contract. Universities began inviting Elijah to guest lecture on linguistic integrity in global law. At first, he said no. But then, one morning, he received an envelope. No stamp. Just hand-delivered. Inside, a photograph. Ayanna Briggs in uniform. Smiling. Standing under a flagpole. On the back, a note from her parents. She always said she wanted to teach someday. Thank you for finishing that lesson. Elijah went to the university. Spoke not from slides, but from stories. He told the students, "You don't need to be powerful to expose power. You just need to stay awake when they hope you're asleep." One morning in late spring, he visited an elementary school in the Bronx. They were launching a program called Truth in Translation. The auditorium was full of 10-year-olds and crayons. A little girl stood up and asked, "Are you famous?" He shook his head. "No, just fluent." The class laughed. Then she asked, "Did they ever say sorry?" He paused. "No, but that's okay." "Why?" He smiled. "Because I didn't do this for them. I did it for the ones who never got the chance to speak." That evening, Elijah returned to his apartment. He made tea, opened the window, watched the city below shift between golden and gray. The inbox buzzed again. A junior analyst in Jordan had flagged a clause in Turkish. He replied in 6 lines, brief, clear, exact. Then he leaned back and whispered, as if to Ayanna, to himself, to the future. Silence was never the enemy. It was just waiting for someone to answer it back. The compass sat quietly on the windowsill, still pointing north, not toward fame, not toward revenge, but toward something steady, human, and true. The kind of direction you don't follow for applause. You follow because the world needs you to.